The corridor shook as bursts of gunfire echoed, fluorescent lights flickering like dying stars. Sergeant Miller said this sector was secure. His voice cracked, disbelief laced with fear. Private Daniels stumbled, clutching his stomach, crimson soaking his fatigues. He gasped, "Commander Graves. He still gives orders." Lieutenant Harris dropped to his knees, pressing his hand over the wound, whispering, "That name isn't in any record." Alarms blared, smoke creeping from vents, the hallway morphing into a death trap. A classified file spilled from a soldier's hands, pages flying into a burning barrel. One page escaped, curling at the edges, marked with red ink. Captain Reynolds grabbed it, reading the forbidden seal. "Do not exist." Shadows stretched down the corridor, bootsteps echoing closer. Harris said, "Someone's coming." The dying soldier's eyes widened, terror freezing him. He tried to speak again, but only blood followed. A sudden silence fell, broken only by the crackle of flames. Miller muttered, "What the hell just happened?" The corridor felt cursed, as though history itself was being erased in real time. The sirens wailed louder, but the soldiers froze, paralyzed by the unseen figure. Captain Reynolds whispered, "We should fall back." Miller shook his head. "No retreat, not yet." The smoke thickened, burning eyes and lungs. Harris grabbed Daniel's lifeless hand, whispering, "I won't let them erase you." Miller's boot crunched on a piece of metal, a dog tag scorched and bent. The name engraved was smudged, untraceable. Reynolds said, "Even identities are vanishing." The hallway groaned as if the building itself rejected their presence. Sparks rained from the ceiling, the distant echo of gunfire still alive in the walls. Miller said, "Something unseen is commanding this place." The group pressed against the wall, unsure of what was approaching. Silence stretched dangerously long before the lights buzzed back to life, glowing sickly green. Harris whispered, "This isn't war. It's something else." A low hum vibrated under their boots, as though machinery beneath was alive. Reynolds adjusted his grip on the classified page, saying, "Whoever Graves was, he still controls this ground." Miller kicked aside debris, leading the group forward cautiously. His rifle trembled, though his face stayed rigid. Harris whispered, "We shouldn't be here." Reynolds responded, "Then why are we alive when the others aren't?" The smoke cleared enough to reveal walls, riddled with bullet scars. The air reeked of cordite, like death clung to the walls. Harris muttered, "It wasn't just crossfire, it was execution." Miller halted abruptly as the faint hum grew louder. His eyes widened when he noticed cameras embedded in the ceiling, wires fresh and clean, blinking red. Reynolds clenched his jaw, saying, "They're watching us." Harris glanced up, terror overtaking him. "If Graves is dead," Harris said, "then who's behind the lens?" Silence followed, broken only by the static buzz of electricity crawling across the walls. Miller said, "Ghost or not, someone still gives orders." The men froze as a faint whisper came through hidden speakers, repeating one word, "Erase." The whisper, "Erase," echoed again, vibrating through the metal walls. Reynolds said, "It's not human." Miller snarled, "It's orders." Sparks lit from exposed wiring as Harris shouted, "We're being hunted." The cameras turned silently, red lights focusing directly on them. Miller raised his rifle, firing at one camera, sparks bursting as the lens shattered. The whisper cut off abruptly, leaving suffocating silence. Smoke drifted past broken glass on the floor, glowing under the emergency light. Harris breathed. They knew who would come here. Reynolds held up the classified page, its ink bleeding under heat. "They don't erase paper," he said. "They erase us." Footsteps echoed again from behind. But slower this time, deliberate. Miller said, "We move forward. If we turn back, we're dead already." Harris swallowed, his knuckles white around his sidearm. The hum beneath the floor grew like a heartbeat. The corridor seemed alive, like the walls themselves wanted to swallow them whole. The soldiers advanced cautiously, boots clanging against steel. A heavy blast door loomed ahead, sealed with strange symbols etched across its frame. Miller whispered, "This isn't standard military." Reynolds pressed his palm against it, feeling vibrations. "Something is alive behind this door." Harris' eyes darted nervously, his breath ragged. The dead behind them, and the unknown ahead pulled like twin jaws. Harris muttered, "We shouldn't open it." Reynolds stared at the page, then back at the door. "Graves still commands, even in death." Miller said, "Then let's meet the commander." The corridor groaned as if warning them. The hum deepened, metallic heartbeat shaking the floor. Sparks flickered across the ceiling, dust raining down. Reynolds gritted his teeth, pressing a sequence on the keypad. Harris closed his eyes as gears churned, metal screeching. The blast door began to shift, light seeping from within, a pale, unnatural glow. The whisper returned, softer this time, chilling them. "Welcome back." The blast door creaked open, revealing a chamber lined with rusted consoles and broken monitors. Captain Reynolds whispered, "This place was sealed for a reason." Sergeant Miller's jaw clenched. "Then why is it awake now?" The pale glow revealed walls covered in faded photographs of soldiers, their faces scratched out. Lieutenant Harris trembled, pointing. "They're all erased." Reynolds picked up a fallen dog tag, rubbing the surface, but the name was sanded smooth. Miller said, "Even their ghosts don't get names." A low hum pulsed from the center of the room where a metal chair sat, restraints dangling. Bloodstains marred the floor beneath it, dried into black smears. Harris muttered, "Interrogations happened here." Reynolds lifted the half-burned file, matching the red stamps to the symbols etched in the steel. "This isn't coincidence," he growled. Miller's eyes narrowed. "Commander Graves ran this place." The hum grew louder, vibrating their bones. Harris whispered, "If he's dead, then who's still giving orders?" Silence swallowed them whole as the lights flickered. Reynolds stepped closer to the chair, boots echoing hollow on the metal floor. Harris said, "Don't touch it." Miller muttered, "Afraid of what? Ghosts?" Reynolds traced his fingers along the steel armrest, feeling grooves carved deep into it. "Initials," he whispered. "Men died here leaving their marks." Harris shook his head violently. "Marks don't matter if names vanish." The chamber lights buzzed, and static leapt across the cracked monitors. For a brief second, grainy footage of soldiers in the room flickered. Faces blurred, voices muted. Miller froze. "That's us," he whispered. The image on the screen showed 3 men mirroring their own positions. Reynolds growled, "It's Liv. Someone's watching from beyond the grave." Harris backed away, panic in his eyes. "We're pawns on a dead man's board." Reynolds turned sharply. "Not pawns. Witnesses." The static intensified before screens shattered simultaneously, glass raining down. Miller barked, "They know we're here." The hum stopped, leaving an oppressive silence heavier than sound. The silence pressed like a hand on their throats. Miller said, "We need answers, not superstition." Reynolds lifted the page again, his voice steady. "Graves commanded Erasure units. This proves it." Harris shook his head, whispering, "Erasure doesn't stop with missions. It devours people." Reynolds snapped, "Then why are we still breathing?" Harris muttered, "Because we're not meant to leave." Miller kicked at the floor, revealing burned ID cards melted into steel. He snarled, "They burned men alive in here." Reynolds' eyes narrowed. "And called it classified." The chamber lights flickered again, and an intercom hissed to life. A distorted voice rasped, "Loyalty is silence." Harris staggered backward, clutching his ears. "He's dead, Reynolds, but he's still speaking." Miller growled, "Dead men don't give orders." Reynolds stared at the console, jaw tight. "Graves does." The lights cut, leaving only the pale glow of the file page, the red stamp bleeding like fresh ink. The intercom crackled again, repeating, "Loyalty is silence." Harris shouted, "Stop it." His voice echoed back, distorted, mocking. Reynolds leaned closer to the console. "You want loyalty? you'll get truth. He smashed the butt of his rifle against the controls, sparks spraying. Miller pulled him back, growling, "We don't know what we're waking." The monitors flickered one last time, showing an image of Commander Graves, face obscured, eyes black voids. Harris froze, whispering, "He's watching." Reynolds' face hardened. "No, he's directing." The chamber doors slammed shut behind them with a metallic boom. Dust rained from the ceiling as locks clamped. Miller raised his rifle, scanning. "We're sealed in." Reynolds muttered, "Not sealed, contained." Harris trembled violently, his breaths shallow. "Why keep us alive?" Reynolds glanced at the burned file. "Because unfinished orders demand witnesses." "Why?" The hum returned, deeper now, shaking the ground, making their teeth vibrate. The hum deepened until it felt like a heartbeat under the floor. Harris whispered, "This place breathes." Miller aimed his rifle at the chair. "Orders don't breathe." Reynolds shook his head. "Orders live longer than men." The photographs on the wall curled as if touched by invisible fire, faces disintegrating into ash. Harris screamed, "They're erasing them now." Reynolds grabbed his shoulder, snapping, "Focus." Miller's gaze hardened as he stepped closer to the chair. "If Graves wants us here, then he wants us to listen." The restraints on the chair rattled by themselves, chains clinking in rhythm with the hum. Harris backed away, panic overtaking him. "It's alive." Reynolds gritted his teeth. "No. It's memory, chained metal." The lights dimmed until only the pale glow from the file remained. Harris whispered, "We're ghosts already." Miller tightened his grip on the rifle. "Then, let's haunt the machine." The chamber air grew heavier, pressing against their lungs. Sergeant Miller said, "We can't stay here." Captain Reynolds stepped forward, holding the page like a weapon. "The truth is here." Lieutenant Harris' hands shook violently. "Truth will kill us faster than bullets." A low groan echoed as the restraints rattled again. Miller's eyes scanned the walls. "We need to know who else was erased." Reynolds pointed to a file cabinet welded shut. "Answers are in there." Harris snapped. "Then pry it open, and wake every ghost chained here." Sparks fell from the ceiling as metal groaned. The hum beneath the floor rose, shifting from steady to frantic. Reynolds muttered, "Graves is restless." Miller's jaw tightened. "Graves is dead." Harris whispered, "Dead doesn't mean gone." Silence filled the chamber before a loud crack split the floor, dust rising. The ground trembled, and the walls themselves seemed alive. The crack widened, revealing cables pulsing with faint red light like veins. Harris said, "It's alive." Reynolds gritted his teeth. "It's machinery." Miller shook his head. "No machine breathes like this." The cables twitched, spilling sparks that lit the chamber. Harris stumbled backward. "We shouldn't be here." Reynolds tore open part of the wall, revealing layers of erased photographs behind steel. Faces smudged, eyes gouged. They wanted to bury more than bodies. Miller clenched his fists. They buried the truth. Harris shouted, "Stop tearing it open." His voice echoed back with a mocking delay. The cables pulsed faster, glowing crimson. Reynolds muttered, "It's feeding off us." Miller pointed his rifle at the cables. "Then let's starve it." Harris grabbed his arm. "Shoot, and we may not survive." Silence fell as the hum beneath their feet returned, stronger, echoing like a heartbeat. The cables pulsed, and the monitors flickered back to life, this time showing moving soldiers. Miller's eyes narrowed. "That's us again." Reynolds stared. "But look closer." The footage showed them dying, each one executed in sequence. Harris's face went pale. "We're watching our deaths." Reynolds tightened his grip on the page. "Then they already wrote the ending." Miller spat on the floor. "Then we changed the script." The chamber lights flared bright, blinding them, before returning to dim glow. Harris whispered, "We're not supposed to win." Reynolds said, "Winning isn't survival, it's telling the truth." Miller's rifle shook slightly in his hands, anger burning through his fear. The screens shifted again, showing Commander Graves, blurred but commanding soldiers. Reynolds growled. Even erased men still command. Harris muttered. Then what are we fighting? Graves or the machine? The footage shifted to display maps, marked with erased missions across continents. Reynolds whispered, "It spans decades." Miller muttered, "Whole wars fabricated." Harris's eyes darted nervously. If they erased wars, what's left that's real? Reynolds slammed his hand on the console. That's why we're here, to drag the truth into daylight. Miller said, "Truth buries men." Harris shouted, "And lies bury nations." The maps flickered, revealing red lines connecting erased names. Reynolds froze, pointing. "Every line leads back to Graves." Miller whispered, "Dead men don't plan wars." Harris' voice cracked. "Unless they never died." Sparks rained as the maps burned away, leaving only the words, "Erase witnesses." Reynolds clenched the page, jaw tightening. "We're not witnesses, we're survivors." Miller growled. "Then let's survive long enough to fight back." The chamber shook violently, dust falling from the ceiling. The hum turned into a roar. Reynolds said, "They know we're resisting." Miller shouted, "Then let's give them something to fear." Harris grabbed Reynolds' arm, pleading, "You don't understand. They'll erase us before the world knows." Reynolds' voice was steel. "Then we bleed truth into their lies." Sparks exploded from the walls, cables whipping like serpents. Miller opened fire, bullets shredding glowing veins. Harris screamed, "Stop!" The lights flared crimson as alarms blared. Reynolds pressed the file to his chest, eyes burning. "Graves doesn't get the last order." The roar rose until the steel beneath their feet cracked, the floor trembling. Harris collapsed to his knees, whispering, "We're already erased." Reynolds stared into the glow, defiant. "Not yet." The crimson glow faded, leaving only flickering sparks. Captain Reynolds steadied himself, clutching the half-burned file. Sergeant Miller muttered, "We survived, but for what?" Lieutenant Harris whispered, "We're not meant to survive. We're meant to vanish." Reynolds turned, jaw tight. "Then why is Graves still giving orders?" A sudden burst from the console lit up the chamber, revealing grainy footage of families, wives, children, brothers. Miller stepped forward, voice cracking. "That's my brother." Harris's face drained of color. "That's my sister." Reynolds stared at the images in silence, his own family appearing, their faces stamped with the same red seal. "Erase," Harris shouted. "They're not just erasing soldiers, they're erasing bloodlines." Miller slammed his fist against the steel wall. "They're rewriting history itself." Reynolds' voice was low, heavy. Graves wasn't silenced. He was preserved, buried in the system. Harris whispered, "And now he's coming for us all." Miller's breath came heavy as he stared at his brother's face fading from the screen. "This isn't war, it's extermination." Harris trembled, pressing his hand to the steel wall. "They'll erase everyone we love." Reynolds growled, "Then we stop them here." The monitors shifted again, revealing Graves in uniform, younger, alive, standing with soldiers. Miller muttered, "That's impossible. He's been dead for decades." Reynolds leaned closer, voice sharp. "What if he never died? What if his erasure was staged?" Harris shook violently. "Then we've been fighting a ghost who still breathes." The footage showed Graves handing out orders, soldiers nodding. Reynolds spat. "Fabricated enemies. Manufactured wars." Miller slammed his rifle against the console. "We bled for lies," Harris whispered. "And the system still feeds on us." The screens blinked out, leaving their reflections staring back, haunted and broken. The chamber doors rattled violently, metallic echoes shaking dust loose. Miller raised his rifle, snarling, "They're coming." Reynolds said, "Not they. Him." Harris shouted, "Graves is dead." Reynolds snapped, Then why is he still giving orders? The door burst open, revealing a soldier in black armor, faceless visor glowing faint red. Miller fired instinctively, bullets sparking off reinforced plating. The soldier didn't flinch, moving with mechanical precision. Harris screamed, "It's not human." Reynolds growled, "It's his hand." A shadow operative. The soldier advanced, rifle raised. Miller tackled Harris out of the line of fire. Sparks burst as bullets ricocheted off steel. Reynolds raised his weapon, shouting, "We're fighting the system's ghost." Harris cried, "We'll never win against shadows." Reynolds' eyes hardened. "Then we burn them with light." The shadow operative moved fast, dodging Miller's fire, slamming Harris against the wall. Harris gasped, "Help!" Reynolds lunged forward, striking the visor with his rifle stock. Sparks flew, cracks spreading across the glass. For a second, the visor flickered, revealing a face beneath. Young, pale, eyes eerily familiar. Miller froze. "That's Graves." Reynolds' breath caught. "No, it's his echo." The operative twisted violently, throwing Reynolds to the ground. Harris scrambled up, shaking, shouting, "He's not alive, he's replicated." Miller roared, firing point blank. The bullets knocked the operative back, sparks raining as armor cracked. The figure fell against the chair, restraints snapping shut around him as though the machine welcomed its master. The hum rose again, deafening now. Reynolds pushed himself up, blood on his lip, whispering. Graves never died. He multiplied. The restraints clamped down, and the operative convulsed, his face flickering between human and machine. Harris shouted, "It's him! It's Graves!" Reynolds shook his head. "No, it's every soldier they erased." Miller stepped back, stunned. They built an army of ghosts. Sparks erupted, walls vibrating as the chair lit with crimson veins. The operative's voice distorted, echoing through speakers. "Obedience is survival." Harris covered his ears, screaming. Reynolds yelled, "Survival isn't life." Miller raised his rifle again but hesitated, staring at the man-machine hybrid. "How do you kill something that already died?" Reynolds' face hardened. "By making sure the world remembers it lived." The lights burst, plunging them into darkness except for the red glow of Graves' face, frozen between man and shadow. The chamber pulsed with crimson light as the restraints tightened around the shadow operative. Sergeant Miller shouted, He's not dying, he's waking." Captain Reynolds lifted the half-burned file, his voice steady. "Then we stop him now." Lieutenant Harris backed into the corner, trembling. "We can stop him. We're already erased." Sparks erupted from the walls and the floor shook violently. Reynolds slammed the file onto the console. "We fight with the truth." Miller snarled, raising his rifle. "Truth once stopped bullets." The operative's distorted voice filled the chamber. "Obedience is survival, defiance is erasure." Harris screamed, covering his ears. "He's everywhere." Reynolds gritted his teeth. "Then let him hear us defy him." Miller unleashed fire on the restraints, sparks flying, chains shattering. The operative broke free, red glow flooding the room. Reynolds roared, "This ends tonight." The operative lunged with unnatural speed, slamming Reynolds against the wall. Miller shouted, firing into its chest, bullets sparking off armor. "Fall, damn you." Harris crawled across the floor, gasping. "We're fighting something built to erase us." Reynolds grunted, struggling against its grip, blood streaking his face. "It can bleed." He jammed his knife into the operative's side. Sparks burst as the machine staggered. Miller rushed forward, unloading his rifle at point blank. "Stay down." The operative staggered but roared, voice layered with static. Defiance breeds silence. Harris's eyes widened as he spotted a power conduit sparking near the floor. "Hey!" "The cables!" he screamed. Reynolds twisted free, slamming the operative toward the conduit. Sparks exploded, electricity surging through armor. The scream was both human and machine, shaking the chamber. Electricity coursed through the operative, its body convulsing violently. Reynolds staggered back, gasping. Miller dragged him to his feet. "You all right?" Reynolds spat blood. "Alive enough," Harris shouted. "It's not dead." The operative rose again, smoke rising from cracked armor, its face flickering between graves and nameless soldiers. Miller's voice cracked. "It's all of them." Reynolds steadied his rifle. Every man they erased, stitched into one machine. Harris's eyes filled with terror. "Then killing it means killing them again." The operative's voice echoed. "You can't kill what never lived." Sparks rained from the ceiling as it advanced. Reynolds gritted his teeth. "Then, we kill the lie," Miller roared, charging forward, unloading every bullet left in his rifle. Sparks showered the chamber, the operative stumbling but still standing. The operative swung its arm, sending Miller crashing into a console. Harris screamed, rushing to his side. "He's hurt!" Reynolds fired shots tearing through cracked armor, sparks flying. The operative staggered, falling against the steel chair again. Its voice hissed. "Orders never die." Reynolds shouted, "Then I'll bury them." He grabbed the half-burned file, shoving it into the console. Sparks erupted as the machine jolted. Systems screaming. Harris pulled Miller up, blood streaming down his face. "He's killing himself doing this," Miller growled weakly. "Let him." The operative thrashed violently, voice breaking into static. "Erase. Erase. Erase." Reynolds screamed, pressing harder, sparks burning his hands. "You don't erase men. You erase lies." The monitors burst, raining shards. Harris shouted, "Reynolds, stop! You'll die with it!" The chamber shook violently, alarms blaring. Reynolds pressed the file deeper into the console, shouting, "This ends now." The operative convulsed, its face shifting between countless soldiers, each scream echoing. Miller, bleeding, grabbed Harris. "We need to move," Harris cried. "Not without Reynolds." The walls cracked as flames spread, ceiling collapsing. Reynolds turned, eyes burning with defiance. "Go, tell them the truth." Miller shouted back, "We won't leave you." Reynolds roared, "That's an order." Sparks consumed the console as the operative let out one final scream, its body tearing apart in a storm of fire and static. Harris dragged Miller toward the door, both stumbling as the chamber erupted. Reynolds stood defiantly in the glow, consumed by flames and light. His last words echoed, "Truth survives." The blast swallowed him whole. The blast thunder faded, replaced by silence, heavy as ash. The chamber was gone, swallowed by fire and smoke. Sergeant Miller dragged his battered body through a broken corridor, coughing violently. Lieutenant Harris stumbled beside him, eyes wide with grief. "Reynolds," he whispered, voice breaking. Miller groaned. He gave the order. We followed. Flames licked the walls, steel beams collapsing like bones. Harris clenched his fists, trembling. "He shouldn't have died for lies." Miller snarled weakly. "He died for truth." They stumbled into a tunnel where air vents wheezed, smoke crawling upward like ghosts. Harris fell to his knees, clutching his sidearm. "We're already erased." Miller gritted his teeth, forcing him up. "Not erased. Alive." "That's the difference." Their boots echoed hollow, the silence stretching too long, as if the dead listened from the dark. The tunnel narrowed, air heavy with ash. Harris whispered, "We should have died with him." Miller snapped. "He ordered us to live." Harris's voice trembled. "For what? To be hunted?" Miller stopped, leaning against the wall, breath ragged. "To tell the story." Harris shook his head, staring at the floor. "No one will believe us." Miller lifted his chin, eyes burning. "They don't have to believe. They just need to hear." The silence stretched. Then a faint noise echoed. Boots on steel. Harris froze, gripping Miller's arm. "They're still coming," Miller muttered. "They always come." Harris's hands shook as he whispered, "Then maybe this time we don't run." Miller stared into the dark, jaw set. "We don't run. We endure." The sound faded, swallowed by smoke. They emerged into a larger chamber, collapsed ceiling, exposing faint moonlight from above. Harris lifted his gaze, whispering, "Sky. It still exists." Miller coughed, dragging himself forward. "Don't look up. Look ahead." The rubble was littered with broken helmets, scorched rifles, and names etched into steel plates, half melted. Harris crouched, brushing dust from a plate. The name dissolved in his hand, ash scattering into the air. His voice cracked. "They've erased even the dead." Miller's fists clenched. "Not while I breathe." Harris turned to him, voice breaking. "You can't carry the truth alone." Miller growled, "Then help me carry it." The faint breeze drifted down, carrying the ash upward into the night sky. Miller limped across the rubble, determination etched in every step. Harris followed, shoulders slumped under invisible weight. "What if they silence us before we speak?" Miller glanced back, eyes hardened. "Then our silence becomes the evidence." Harris whispered, "Reynolds should have lived, not us." Miller shook his head. He chose. "We honor it." The night sky above seemed distant, unreachable, as if freedom itself was just a myth. Harris muttered, "We'll never be free." Miller growled, "Truth is freedom, even if it kills us." They passed a burned-out terminal still sparking faintly. Harris stopped, staring into the broken glass. His reflection warped, face fragmented. "Do you ever wonder if we're already erased?" Miller answered without hesitation, "Not erased. Remembered." The tunnel opened into the night. Air cold, stars veiled by drifting ash. Harris stumbled forward, collapsing onto dirt, gasping. "We made it out." Miller stepped beside him, staring into the darkness. "Out doesn't mean safe." Harris turned, tears streaking his ash-stained face. "Then what now?" Miller's voice was quiet but firm. "Now we tell the world what Graves became." Harris shook his head, whispering, "The world won't listen." Miller crouched, gripping his shoulder. "Then we make them listen." The silence of night pressed heavy, broken only by the distant howl of wind. Harris looked up at the stars, voice trembling. "Reynolds should have been here to see this." Miller's gaze hardened, jaw set. "He is. Every breath we take is his legacy." The night air cut sharp as blades, ash drifting like snow. Sergeant Miller leaned against a boulder, chest heaving, blood drying on his torn uniform. Lieutenant Harris sat in the dirt, staring at his trembling hands. "We walked out, but it feels like we're still inside." Miller spat into the dust. "We never leave it. We carry it." Harris looked at him, eyes hollow. "Reynolds carried it too. Look where it got him." Miller's voice cracked, quieter. "It got us here." The stars blinked faint above them, distant and cold, offering no comfort. Harris muttered, "We can run, but they'll follow." Miller nodded. "Then let them follow. At least they'll know we exist." The silence stretched, broken only by the distant rumble of collapsing steel behind them. Harris whispered, "Maybe silence is the only truth left." Miller shook his head. "No, silence is surrender." Miller pushed himself upright, groaning as pain lanced through his ribs. Harris rose slowly, unsteady but determined. "If we tell them, they'll erase us faster." Miller adjusted his rifle, jaw tightening. "Then we tell them louder." Harris swallowed hard, staring at the horizon where faint city lights flickered. "What if the city is part of it too?" Miller's gaze followed his. "Then the city needs to hear most." Harris whispered, "We'll be hunted every step." Miller's lips twisted into a grim smile. "Let them hunt. Every chase leaves a trail." Harris muttered, "And trails end in graves." Miller's voice grew hard. "Then let it end in the grave of the machine." The wind carried their words into the night, as though even the air kept the secret alive. They marched slowly through the wasteland, ash crunching beneath their boots. Harris's voice trembled. Do you ever wonder if we'll vanish before we speak? Miller kept walking, shoulders squared. I wonder when, not if. But that doesn't change the mission. Harris laughed bitterly. Mission. It's not war anymore. Miller glanced at him, eyes steel. It's always war, just not the kind they wrote about. The ruins around them glowed faint with ember light, shadows stretching long. Harris whispered, We're already ghosts. Miller shook his head. Ghosts don't bleed. His hand brushed his side, blood soaking through, but his pace never faltered. Harris said, You're dying. Miller's voice was cold. We're all dying. Question is if anyone remembers us. The city loomed faintly in the distance, its lights blurred through smoke. Harris stopped, panting. If we step inside, we vanish. Files close, names erased. Miller halted, staring at the glow. If we don't, Reynolds burned for nothing. Harris's face twisted with grief. You call that justice? Miller's voice was sharp. I call it duty. Silence pressed heavy, the night air electric with dread. Harris whispered, I don't want to vanish nameless. Miller placed a hand on his shoulder, firm. Then speak before they silence you. Harris's eyes filled with tears. And if no one listens? Miller's gaze hardened. They'll remember when the ground itself whispers our names. The horizon darkened as storm clouds rolled, lightning flashing faint over the city. Harris whispered, What if truth never survives? Miller's voice was steady. Truth outlives us. Always. The wind howled, scattering ash like fractured memories. They stood together in silence, listening to the storm's rumble. Harris closed his eyes, whispering, Reynolds' name will never be written. Miller's gaze fixed on the city, eyes burning. Then graves will remember. Lightning split the sky, illuminating their faces scarred, haunted, but unbroken. For a moment, the silence itself felt forbidden, as though the world had already tried to erase this conversation. Harris opened his eyes, whispering, The war wasn't overseas. Miller finished the thought with steel in his tone. It was here all along.